Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the really fascinating world of genetics to figure out exactly why we inherit the unique physical features we do. We are going to unpack the biological blueprints that make us, well, us. Seriously, next time you look in the mirror, ask yourself, who do you really look like? Which specific traits do you think you inherited from your dad, and which ones came from your mom? It's a question we humans have been asking for centuries, way before we ever actually understood the science behind it. Section 1. Who do you look like? Analyzing family traits. When you sit down to describe your family and analyze the common traits you all share, it's kind of wild, right? You might have your mom's eye color, but your dad's hair texture, or maybe you've got a specific temperament, a quirky sense of humor, or a talent that totally mirrors one side of your family. But you're never a perfect carbon copy. And that brings up the profound mystery of why some of your traits are entirely different from either of your parents. Like, how does a child of two brown-eyed parents end up with crystal blue eyes? Section 2. The Language of Heredity, Your Genetic Instruction Manual. To crack this genetic mystery, we first need to learn the language of heredity. Let's start with genes. Think of genes as tiny little instruction manuals passed down from parents to children. These manuals are written in specific sequences of DNA bases, literally just the letters A, T, C, and G. They tell your body exactly how to build proteins, and those proteins, they run the whole show. They're responsible for everything from your eye color and height to your metabolism and even certain behaviors. A tiny shift in the order of those four letters can completely change the trait it controls. So where do we actually keep all these instruction manuals? Well, they're stored on chromosomes. You can picture chromosomes as these thread-like bookshelves located inside every single cell of your body. They physically hold the segments of DNA that make up your fundamental units of heredity. And just like an instruction manual might have a few different editions, genes come in different versions too. We call these alternative versions alleles. They hang out at the exact same location or locus on homologous chromosomes. And it's the specific combination of these different alleles that gives us all of our totally unique trait variations. So how do we actually get these alleles? Well, the transmission of these traits follows three basic rules of the game. Rule 1, traits are controlled by genes. Rule 2, every individual gets exactly 2 alleles for each trait, one from mom, one from dad. And Rule 3, those inherited alleles can either be dominant or recessive. Section 3. Dominant versus recessive traits. The rules of the game. Let's break down how these rules actually play out in real life. A dominant trait acts like a person shouting through a megaphone in a tiny room. It's expressed whenever it's present, completely overriding its recessive counterpart. The recessive trait, on the other hand, is much, much quieter. It's only expressed in the complete absence of the dominant allele. If the loud voice is there, the quiet voice gets totally drowned out. Section 4. Genotype and phenotype. Two sides of the genetic coin. Now, this brings us to the absolutely crucial difference between what's happening inside our cells and what we actually see on the outside. Your genotype is your hidden genetic code. It's the specific alleles you inherited. You can't see it just by looking at someone. Your phenotype, however, is the physical, observable expression of those genes, like your hair texture or your height. And keep in mind, your phenotype can also be influenced by your environment. Think about how these puzzle pieces fit together. When we're predicting genetic outcomes, if the two alleles you inherited from your parents are perfectly identical, your genotype is called homozygous. You could be homozygous dominant or homozygous recessive. But if those two alleles are different, say you get one dominant and one recessive, then you are heterozygous. If we map this whole journey out, it's a beautiful logical flow. We start right at the top with genes, which are housed on chromosomes at very specific locations. These genes have alternative versions, or alleles. If the alleles match, the genotype is homozygous. If they don't, it's heterozygous. And at the end of the day, the expressed allele acts as the dominant force, while the hidden one remains recessive. Section 5. Mapping with pedigrees. Tracing family history. So, how do we track these rules across multiple generations? Let's play genetic detective for a second. If you look at observable traits, you can start making some pretty accurate hypotheses. If a father has brown eyes, which is typically a dominant trait, but the mother has blue eyes, which is recessive, and their child has blue eyes, well, the father must be heterozygous. He has to be carrying that hidden, quiet, recessive allele for blue eyes. Otherwise, the child couldn't possibly be homozygous recessive. To step up from just a basic list, scientists use something called a pedigree chart. A pedigree is basically a diagram of a family's genetic history. By mapping out a family tree with specific symbols, we can visually describe patterns of inheritance through pedigree analysis. We track exactly how dominant and recessive traits are passed down, which lets us analyze our own family traits and even predict the simple genetic ratios for future offspring. Now, you might be wondering, who actually figured all of this out? We owe this entire framework of Mendelian inheritance to a guy named Gregor Mendel, rightly known as the father of genetics. Mendel was an Austrian monk who ran these incredibly groundbreaking experiments on pea plants back in the mid-1800s. Through simple, methodical crosses of these plants, he discovered the law of dominance, the law of segregation, and the law of independent assortment. And he did all of this literally before anyone had ever seen a chromosome or even knew what DNA was. Ultimately, digging into Mendelian genetics and tracing our family pedigrees isn't just some cold textbook science exercise. It's actually a profound celebration of human uniqueness. Understanding heredity reminds us that our genetic differences are exactly what make our entire species stronger, healthier, and incredibly adaptable to our environment. We've explored the language of heredity, the rules of dominant and recessive genes, and exactly how to track them. So I'll leave you with this. What hidden genetic stories are just waiting to be uncovered in your own instruction manual? When you sit down to describe your family and map out your very own pedigree chart, what unique traits will you discover? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring the amazing science of you.